Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's time for not really a package from China, but it is, because we're going to talk about 5 different products that I bought from AliExpress in the last couple of years. They were pretty damn horrible. Maybe you missed out the review. Here a quick recap. Enjoy, consider subscribing, hit the little bell, come with the Wicked family, and let's go. Alright guys, for the number 5 I chose this video game mini TV game console 1001, or better said like a NES clone ripoff. And from all the freaking clones I chose this one, because it was more like the latest version. I think it's more like I reviewed this thing in 2020 and they're still making these things with freaking AV out, but it has more like different emulators inside, so they are like moving on from the 8-bit stuff up to multi systems and with multi-game platform, multi-emulators, how you want to call this. The mold itself was nothing like the original NES Mini Classic. It has an TF slot, so indeed we can add new games. It works kind of weird. Sometimes you just can drag and drop, but sometimes you can just not even add new games very simply. You need to have more like a little bit of coding. It came with a toilet paper manual, like always of course, but with some quick explanation. It was a pretty good toilet paper manual this time, like with some quick explanation how the system works. We even have a quick load, quick save, so they did quite some effort with the software or improving it. But coming back to the AV out, oh boy, AV out in 2020, even now in 2021. It's fun if you're having a CRT, but these things were not the best. And when it comes to the signal output, there we're going to get the biggest disappointment, and that's the reason why I put this NES Mini Classic 1001 multi-platform simulator on the shitty list of 2020 in my opinion, or 2021, more like this shitty list now, because it was so disappointing, and more like after all these freaking things they still managed to mess it up. And I tried different cables in the review and it didn't help whatsoever. It was more like this really poor signal output. But when it came to the emulation, there we had like the biggest issues. Every issue that we had, like with the beginning of the era of the fake, let's say, multi-system from China, this thing suffered from them all. Like screen tearing, frame drops, you name it, games were not playable. It was just one big freaking nightmare. The idea was pretty cool in my opinion. It's more like you're having all these different games you can play, but the 4 buttons make no sense, because fighting games were basically unplayable because we need at least 6 buttons, like Street Fighter. So beside the shitty emulation, the controllers were freaking awful. They played awful, but they also make no sense, and you couldn't use any other different controller like a normal USB controller. So therefore I put this number 5 position, this horrible 1001 NES clone. It was just a freaking nightmare, and I completely didn't understand why they even released something like this in 2021. So for the number 4, I have chosen this Pokegear handheld. I have reviewed a lot of handhelds, but this one was the biggest disappointment of them all. The Pokegear was pretty damn expensive. You couldn't find it on every single shop on AliExpress, but this thing had so many freaking issues that it was just really disappointing. And it came with a nice box, I must hand it to them, and the Pokegear is kind of catchy, like Pokemon Pokegear, you know. But in the end, when you take a close look at it, oh boy, I will tell you what was really bad about it. It already started with the dual toilet paper manual. Yep, makes no sense, 2 manuals, same language, same shitty toilet paper manuals. So that was more like the beginning of the misery. But I can recall this thing was more like a rip-off from the BitBoy back in the day, and with rip-off it looks very similar like the shell, but the buttons and everything like the D-pad was pretty horrible. The placement, it was just a one-on-one copy, but only they give it a different name and a different color, and the button some weird coloring, kind of weird. But okay, it also has a CF slot, and I can tell you here where it's going to be really horrible. Because when you want to boot it up and you want to add new games, you need to convert them in a special format, if you can still recall it, and it doesn't really work that great. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to put it on the number 4 position, because they ripped the BitBoy off and made it even worse. Yeah, it is possible. And not to forget, they're using these very horrible SP batteries, like low milliamp, didn't work very great, and most time they are dead on arrival. They are cheap though, so if you want to have a couple of them, you can always buy them a couple of dollars on AliExpress. So the convenient thing, there were some games built in, a couple of them, not a lot. And what I already mentioned, you could add them with the SD card, but you need to do some weird converting. You couldn't like slap the files on the SD card and play them. The emulation itself was pretty damn, I found it really horrible. And didn't have like the same experience that you need to have with the BitBoy or with a Game Boy Advance. Combining the AV out with an upscaler to 1080p, I must say it doesn't work that bad. It's more like, hey, we're having a positive thing from this handheld, and I think that was one of the only positive things I can find. Yep. So the emulation itself was the same poor emulation that you get, only now on the big screen. So a fun story. Yeah, it's not really fun. It's more like this bloody thing basically stopped working after making the review. That was more like, for me, the most horrible experience I got. Like, the transferring data with the emulation, that's pretty damn awful. You couldn't do a lot of things with it. Like with original, you could play a lot of different games, but it's more like having GBA games, and that's it. And it didn't even work that great. So for the number 4, I choose the Poké Gear. That doesn't work anymore. I love to have myself a Sega Nomad someday. Maybe when in the future I already bought one, but I'm a big Sega fan. I'm just a Sega fanboy, but don't get me wrong, I love my Super NES too. But the Poké Gear, or sorry, Pocket Game was it? The Sega Nomad clone. I recently uploaded a video to my other channel, and I can tell that, oh man, this was really bad. And the reason why this was so bad is because the emulation was really horrible, like the baddest emulation I've seen. And a combination that even the screen went completely dark, like it didn't work after, let's say, 5 hours of playing with it. It did came with built-in games and a lot of good naughty games, I love to call it. So therefore it was quite interesting. You could play original game cards, but you can also play the games that came with it. But I can tell you, like, you need to check the full review if you want to see like the gameplay, actually seeing it on the handheld and how it sounds. And overall you can see they are using like this really old LCD displays, not the IPS and the fancy displays that we're going to get with the new Embernic handhelds. It was really cheap, horrible. Fun fact is that I contacted the seller after buying it and he admitted to me that this product was really bad. So I was more like, couldn't you say that before I freaking bought it? Yeah, you can't not even find it anymore, so that is not a big of a deal. But yeah man, it's just really horrible that you're getting a device like this from China. And the positive thing is that they're not selling it anymore, but the Pocket Go or the Pocket Game, if you can see this thing, just run away and don't buy it. Because you will lose a lot of money on it. Because you cannot even play the games like it should be because of the horrible sound issue. But say, check out the second channel if you want to see the full review. Nevertheless, let's go to the number 2. Oh, for the number 2, I have chosen the PlayStation 4 Mini Classic from AliExpress. Yep, the GS4 Pro Alien Tech. And this thing was really horrible. I got 2 of them. The first one I bought was completely rubbish, like it didn't work at all. And the second one, I must say, he sent me a free one and it did work. But it's basically just a Famicom in the form factor of a PlayStation 4 Mini. Yep, or a PlayStation 4 Pro actually. Fun fact, so this device is just an 8-bit, and this is something for the people who don't know, they're doing it freaking all the time. PlayStation Mini Classic, Super NES, Sega Mini Classic, they slap always a freaking 8-bit in it. And it also comes with 110 games. Yeah. Okay, so the 110 games you can see like, there are some familiar games on it, that's quite naughty. So that's what they're doing, like, sometimes giving you multi-cards, sometimes they have built-in games. That's also like in Gamble. But I must say that it was not the worst AV out signal that I've seen, like with the 1001 NES Mini Classic, and the games were running pretty decent. So when it comes to this 8-bit stuff, most of the time it will run just fine. The most funny feature was more like that you can slide up the top cover and just put in a game cartridge. That was really funny. And of course you can play different games and of course multi-game cartridges if you want to. But the reason I put it on number 2 is because oh man, this thing was so it was awful, like really cheap feel. The PlayStation controller from the first one, I basically can break it in half because it was so flimsy and low quality. And the GS4 or the PlayStation 4 Pro Mini, the idea behind it, it's kind of funny that you can slide it open, but overall it was just one big disappointment. So this was my number 2, the GS4 Pro, the fake PlayStation 4 from AliExpress. And for the number 1, I choose the RetroPlay PS or the PlayStation Mini Classic clone from AliExpress. And this thing was the most horrible product that I have ever seen on the channel. Yep, and now you're wondering, why is this? Now, that is quite simple. Because this thing was not because it's built with a Pi inside. That's kind of cheesy in my opinion. Because, yeah, that is most easy way to go to. But it was not like your typical Raspberry Pi. No, not at all. They messed it up every single way. The Super Arcade emulator, that's by the way I did call it. They always call everything like Super and Arcade. It has more than 50 different platforms. Yeah, that was another lie. Okay, so the shell itself looks kind of nice. More like, it looks like a weird clone. It's not like a 1-1 clone, but I must say that it feels kind of flimsy already with the buttons, the power, and the other one didn't do anything, like 2 USB ports at the front, an LED, and that's it. Like, of course, we're going to get a sticker from the brand itself. And at the back we're going to get HDMI, TF out, and the micro USB for the, not the charging of it, but for the powering on the system itself. The emulation is what you can expect from a Raspberry Pi, and it was not really bad in my opinion, but we're having like issues, big issues that it basically froze, like in the middle of a game list or in the game itself, and it happens a lot. That's where the most horrible experience from this system came from. So when I opened it up, I must say that this is the reason why I say it's not your typical Raspberry Pi. It's more like a very unique product in the inside. But the way how they made it was just a big mess. So there was a fan inside, but there was no way basically the fan can suck in fresh air. So when it comes to this, it's just one big gigantic flaw of a system. They just put a tiny fan in it that runs on the maximum speed. It's more like a freaking vacuum cleaner. And look at this. There is more like a thermal paste pad on it that didn't even have making contact. By the way, there was not even a cooling element on it. So it's just like the biggest joke which you can get when it comes to a system like this. But okay guys, so this is my top 5, my most horrible AliExpress products that I got. I can maybe make like a top 50 or something, but I just want to highlight 5 different versions. If you like this video, consider subscribing, hit the little bell, become on the Wicked family, give this video a like and let me know in the comments. Do you want to see more of these top 5 weird? I have so many different subjects I can choose from, but I just wanted to start with this top 5 horrible products. By the way, the controller was not that bad in my opinion. I have smelled my share of chemical crazy China horrible controllers, but this thing was not bad at all. I want to thank you for watching. Consider subscribing, hit the little bell. It would be great to have you in the Wicked family, and I will see you in the next video.